So tonight we're going to talk about continuous delivery is scary. We all want to be rock stars secretly.
Who doesn't?
I want to be a bass player.
I'm Dan. I'm the tech career coach at Velocifier. I'm also the CTO at homes.com.au.
Dan, I am Fred. I'm a principal engineer and I am a mentor.
And this is Engineering of Awesome, as you all know. And tonight we have a special guest, Alan Leslie. Alan, tell us about yourself.
Hi, I'm Alan. I'm really a frustrated guitarist, so I really want to be a rock star. But because I can't do that, I actually work in tech, and I'm principal engineer at a company called Mable.
Okay, so the topic is continuous delivery is scary. Our previous video was on testing in production, which did ruffle a few feathers on the internets. But I would say roughly guesstimating it's about 50-50, I reckon. A lot of people were like, this is awesome. And a lot of people were like, you're a clown. So I don't know. What do you think, you guys?
Always wanted to be a clown. Look, I don't think we were clowns. The fact that people were having a conversation and they were talking about it and they were disagreeing about it means we've actually pushed the right button.
But yeah, there were lots of people who were on board and bought in, and some people mentioned things like trunk-based development. Some people mentioned, I guess, like canary builds and things like that, which we discussed in the video, but weren't quite talked about on LinkedIn. But other people kind of offered that, so that was good. And there were quite a few. There was comments about CrowdStrike and saying, "Oh yeah, if CrowdStrike did what you guys are doing, no wonder that's what happened." And I said, well, it's probably the opposite, in my opinion. They probably don't do enough of that, so that's why the problem happened. But it sounds like, Alan, you have some stories to tell on this topic.
Yeah. I've tried this in various guises over several years. To good success, medium success, and no success at all. And we went on a similar journey in Mable and started that when I joined a couple of years ago, and wanted to shift everything to continuous delivery. It took a while to do. It took about 9 months, even though technically we could have done it really quickly. There's a few key things that happened. Can I name product on this?
Yeah.
Is that okay? Yeah.
Yeah, we're looking for sponsors, so you go for it.
Great, Datadog. I'd love Datadog to sponsor us. Thank you. So
excellent.
I've got a T-shirt. I'd like socks as well. Thanks.
Put the word out. Yep.
I think there's a few key enablers. That was definitely one of them. Datadog unlocked the door for us to be able to do continuous delivery, because it would tell us about issues that we couldn't have possibly have ever proactively monitored or implemented. So I think, but we had to work hard to break down pieces of work into smaller chunks. We also implemented Launch Darkly as well, because another sponsorship call out there. And there was a bunch of progressive things that we did to gain confidence that we could do it, and an acknowledgement some things were going to break and we'd fix it, and that was okay. So I think we sort of built up that cultural aspect that it was okay to experiment with it and do it. And then if it went badly wrong, we would just go back to the old way, which is kind of a Git flow sort of thing. So we had a Git flow model. We just went to trunk based, and I remember the last argument that we had before we switched it all on was whether we would stage things through the release environment and stop them there for a bit before we deployed it into production, and we just went, just push it straight through, and everybody's like, ah. But we did some of the numbers on it, and we've had. Is there any wood? There is wood. I'm just going to touch my guitar. We've had no P1s in the last year since we did it, and we've noticed we have less frequent issues and they're less severe. And we've actually noticed that the teams have doubled their output as a result of that change as well. And I had no clue it was going to end up being like that. So I think that's a really good story to tell. But it definitely came from a culture of we just give it a whirl and experiment with it and see what happens. And if it doesn't quite work, we'll figure out what to do next. And we've still got a ton of gaps, right? We have imperfect testing, a pretty good deployment pipeline that we've gradually optimized. So there's still a bunch of things to work on, right? But yeah. But we're even trying to do it on mobile. How crazy is that?
So. Nice.
So
what does that like what do you mean by mobile? How does it work on mobile?
Oh, I'd have to ask our mobile lead because I'm the world's worst mobile developer. But we're trying to get it so we don't have to do binary releases so often and can do kind of. I think Facebook do this all the time. They do the background app refreshes, so you don't. You know, we're trying to get into that. Even if we did it every day, you know, that's going to be a win over only deploying a binary release once every couple of weeks. So we'd like to do it for everything. So but yeah, it's been a journey. How has your journey been in continuous? Dan, you just recently deleted your staging environment, didn't you?
I did just recently delete my staging environment. Yes, much to the internet's disgust, and it's been quite good actually. I kind of posted on social media and said, "Hey, I just deleted my staging environment," but it wasn't an immediate thing that just happened out of the blue. So there was definitely a journey to get there. It wasn't. If I look back, it was probably 2 years, roughly, or 18 months, or something like that, of when it was first raised. And actually, it probably goes even back further than that because we designed the pipelines to deploy to staging and production at the same time. And because of that, I think that was basically like a live, you're pushing to master, you're committing to master, and it's going directly to production anyway, even if you had staging or not. That has been in place from the beginning. So I think that meant that changes had to be small, like from the beginning. You're running like this, the risk, if you had some massive deployment, massive change, you're quite at risk of escalated risk of having something go wrong. So kind of forced smaller changes, and it forced things like, good monitoring, observability, that kind of thing from the beginning. Discipline in the team to kind of break down work appropriately. And so that happened from the beginning. And about 18 months ago, I think I said to the team, hey, let's delete staging. Not everyone was comfortable with it at the time. And that's fine. But I think over time, we actually had a series of events that happened. So about 9 months ago, we started shutting down staging. A little bit before that, actually, we started shutting staging down overnight just with a script, which is triggered through our CI pipeline. So we had an automated script that would shut the environment down, and then we had an automated script that would spin it back up in the morning. And after time, we're kind of like, well, to save a bit more money, that was a cost-saving change. To save a bit more money, we'll just keep it shut down in the day, and when you need it, then you can spin it up yourself manually. So that happened, and then people became a bit less dependent on staging because it wasn't always on. You had to. There was a bit more resistance to get staging, even though it was just going into the pipeline, hitting a button to actually spin it up, which is pretty easy. It's still like a hurdle someone had to do, right? So I think actually what's important about all this stuff is creating an easy path for developers. Whatever's the easiest path is where people are generally going to flow towards, I think. So shut down staging. And then when we had a new engineer who, I don't know how, but accidentally deleted the staging database. But no one noticed. People weren't using staging that much, and no one noticed for like a week. And then, unfortunately, our backup retention for staging was less than a week. So the database was gone. So we're like, oh, well. Now, it wasn't a severe thing because the way that our architecture works, we actually have multiple copies of our database in live that are running live. So it's like, okay, we could go and restore it pretty easily. But no one really took much effort to restore it. I restored a few tables, and we still had live data being pushed into staging to keep it up to date. But there were a bunch of tables that were missing, or data that was missing anyway. And no one really took the initiative or the effort to go and get it all back up and running properly. So people just started more and more kind of just using production. And then that happened probably like 3 months ago, where it was permanently switched off. You could still spin it up through the CI pipeline with one button, but it was just off, and it was been off for months. And so a couple of weeks ago, I decided I'm just going to delete it. Might as well save the money. Why spend the money on it when it's always down and the database is dead anyway?
Yeah.
So that was it, and staging is now gone.
So do you have a bunch of microservices that you need to coordinate in your environment, right?
Yeah. We've got if you go from front end to database, we've got about 3 tiers or 4 tiers, something like that. So we've got like a backend for front end, and then like a core microservices that handle certain domain requests for different domain areas. So yeah.
So staging's gone.
Staging is gone.
Never to be seen again.
Well, never to be seen again. I did rip almost everything out of the AWS account. I pulled, got all of the Terraform, pretty much everything got destroyed. The only thing I've kept is I kept one role in the account. That's it. Everything else is out. VPC is deleted. NAT gateways are deleted. Everything's out. So you can't actually run a service in there anymore. It's done. All S3 is gone. It took 7 days just to delete S3 data. So that was fun. We had a lot of stuff in there. So
that ends up adding up as well. S3.
It's huge. Yeah. That was just from image attachments that we get from customers. Massive amount of data. Huge. So yeah, it was fun. But yeah, I think maybe when I posted about it on LinkedIn, it maybe shocked some people, but this is something that's been a journey for 18 months or so, I would say.
I do have one caveat to add, which I didn't say. We do have a UAT environment.
Oh, hold on.
And we because we have a monolith.
Oh no.
It's in Ruby on Rails, Fred.
Oh,
you would love it.
Where is this going?
Basically, it's the old problem of large upgrades. If you want to upgrade Rails or something like this, it's really hard to do that in an iterative sort of way. So sometimes you just have to suck it up and say, "Yeah, we do," and so we're not so fixated on it that we can't practically see another option. So
what do you do with the UAT, Alan?
What's that?
What do you do with UAT?
It basically just soaks up some of these big upgrades that we do. So if we want to do a Rails upgrade or a Ruby upgrade or something like that, we'll do it because those are usually quite invasive, and we end up upgrading a lot of things at the same time. So we'll put it on there and give it a good soak test, and then, but at some point it'll get merged in and they'll all get deployed out of production. But it's way bigger than you'd be comfortable doing in just a one release. So
upgrading Ruby and Rails is a big, massive undertaking.
I see where this is going, didn't I?
Something that you don't recommend to the rest of the world.
Yeah, it's like a .NET upgrade,
which is beautiful. Which is lovely.
It just works. You just you never need to test anything, and it just works.
Yeah, I'm glad we agreed on that. But coming back to the challenge of Ruby, massive. upgrade a new IP. Oh well.
Actually,
it can be.
we have a Ruby on Rails app now. It only handles a very small part of the platform.
Keep it that way.
might be something I can look forward to when it comes time to upgrade framework versions.
But it's like that with everything. Whatever your choice of framework is, at some point, you need to do some quite major upgrades, and even just going point versions you can introduce some large changes in it. As soon as you get behind, that job's even worse. So
that's the thing.
And most companies don't keep up to date with it.
No.
Until it's too late. And you go, oh, hang on a minute, I've got to upgrade I have to go from framework to core. And it's like, yeah, well, good luck with that.
Yeah, could be a big job. What about you, Fred? What's your?
Yeah, when are you going to delete staging? Come on.
Yeah, Fred. Hang on. How many staging environments do you have around you at the moment?
Personally, I don't have any staging environments.
Not any at all. Wow,
not at all. No. I also don't have a UAT environment. And also don't have a production environment.
No? Oh.
No.
What do you do yourself?
Are you environmentless? Is that what you're saying?
I am. I believe that we should not label ourselves to environments. Yeah. but on a more serious topic, data, customer data as part of this deploying to production and testing with customer data. Do we test with customer data, or how do we approach that? And how do we protect our customer data in this scenario?
Good point.
It's a good question.
So I didn't want to take all the fun away, but
I'd be interested to hear how you do it with Rails, because having a monolith would probably be more difficult, I would imagine, or your blast radius is bigger because your application probably handles many different types of data, and also Rails out of the box doesn't have much in the way of like separation or permission structures or anything like that. Like application code can talk to basically anything on the data side. So how do you approach that on Rails?
Well, if we think about the customer data aspect of it, we do lean a lot into launch darkly where we can. So when we have a bunch of test accounts in production that we can actually use to exercise some levels of functionality. So if we want to release a feature to a test account, we can do that. There are some things we can't do, just because it's not properly segregated. Like somebody could post a job up in test, and everybody would see it. But we're trying to think of different strategies where we can do that and exclude things that have been created under a certain set of accounts. So I think from a data perspective, you can segregate, and you should look to segregate and acknowledge that you will want to test some things under flags just for those sets of users, and nobody else should see it. And I realize that's quite difficult to do that, but that ultimately gives you all of the flexibility that you want to test all the things that you need to, and then release it to everybody. But that's how we try and approach it mostly. Or we get some nice users. I'm going to say, hey, do you want to test this with us and help us out with it? And sometimes they go no, and sometimes they go yes. And we use them as guinea pigs, and that can be really effective too. Yeah. So yeah, and did you mean about like migrations as well, or protecting customer data? So if I don't want to nuke parts of the database, or
yeah, I think it's a combination, right? On the one hand, is that one is we're testing in production, right, and there's implications of that.
Yeah,
because we're closer to our core data store, and the data that we tell our customers that we're going to look after, and we're going to treat it in a way that is expected.
Yeah.
And we're living closer to that on a daily basis. So I think that's one. And then accessibility.
Do you feel like, and this is a legit question, do you feel that that's easier to reason about with larger changes and more testing? Or is it easier to reason about with smaller changes?
Look, I think like smaller changes, right? The key thing about if I give you a book to read and you have to write a test afterwards, it's going to be very difficult to remember everything. But if I give you one page to read, you're probably going to remember more of that. So just reducing the scope and the context and what you have to shift, deploy, and the responsibility of that becomes easier.
So really, I think we're aligned on that. I look at it as, so some people look at it as assessing risk in the things that you're doing, and that the risk from the pull request, risk from the deployment, risk from the data migration. I kind of invert it a little and think about it as a build-up of confidence that I've got along the way. And I think looking at the blast radius that you change, you can look at a one-liner and go, that's going to be bad. Some one-liners are bad. It's about knowing which one-liner is bad and which one's a good one. But it's certainly easier to spot that one-liner. It's in a small pull request, right? So yeah, and you know, we're bound to have something that goes bad, but we've got a decent process for looking at it in a review, a PIR, and trying to figure out what we need to do next time to prevent it. So I think stuff goes bad in either direction. You know what I think? I actually, now large releases scare me more. I don't know about you. If somebody says I'm only deploying once every 3 months, I go, oh, no. My heart goes a little bit. So how do you test all the things there? You know, and I don't know if you can really.
Yeah, I find with our platform that it has pro. I always thought this was a bad thing, but now in the context of deleting staging is actually a good thing. Is like when you're a small team or a startup and you have like a distributed platform, microservices, that kind of thing, we actually detach like schema migrations and database level changes are in a totally separate change repository. So
yes,
when we make a change, our changes are small enough that if you wanted to get a full stack like change into production, it requires a schema change, which is one change to production, then a microservice which talks that domain or to that set of data, that's another change, then a change on the BFF, and then a change on the front end. So you're actually doing like 4 changes before you actually have your feature even in production or ready to run. And I guess the other thing too I was thought about is that the vast majority of our changes when work is actively happening, I think I estimated it out to be about 80%, it might be up to 90%, is on the front end application. That's where the vast majority of changes happen. And that's like, 3 tiers removed from the database, basically. So there are a few other gates that code has to cross. So if you're making a change on the front end, there's limitations actually to what certain users can do. We run like a read-write replica as well. So if you're talking to the read side of the database, well, there's kind of no risk or very minimal risk of data being modified and changed and broken. So there's all these kind of things, I think, which add up to, I guess, like the data side of things hasn't been so much of a concern when I look at deleting staging, moving to this kind of model. I think the risk is fairly low for us in particular, but
yeah, how would you handle like a long running migration? So if you have to shift a couple of million rows from one place to another, and it's not going to be instant. So how would you both deal with that?
So we had something recent to do that. Actually, I changed a materialized view modification on the database because it was for reasons I was messing with performance. And what I actually did was any change we make like this has to happen in 3 stages, roughly, which is you add the new version side by side. So you can never kind of go in and just delete something or move something in one hit, because you're breaking contracts and you can't do that. So what we do is 3 stages. We add something, then we might copy data into it, or that's the new format. We'll make a code change, which is backwards compatible. So maybe like you can talk to the new data and the old data at the same time. And once versions are all updated, then you can delete the old version. That's pretty much how we have had to do it from the very beginning, because all of our changes go direct to production anyway. We've always had to basically
be compatible. Otherwise, something's going to break, right? So.
Yeah. What about your world, Fred?
He doesn't have to worry about any of this. Dan. It's .NET. It's rainbows and unicorns.
Yeah.
So,
yes, I forgot.
That's why. Look, I mean, if you can see that I'm very quiet at this stage, and I'm just listening to all these challenges, and I'm thinking, in my world, we don't have these challenges, which is great.
Why don't you have these challenges?
Why don't you have them? Yeah, everyone's got these challenges, Fred. Why don't you have challenges?
We don't. Well, yeah. Why would I?
Well, if you've got no environments, you've got no challenges. I mean, there's logic. There's logic in that, right? So
we don't restrict. We don't confine. It's a free world. Data can live wherever.
Not buying it.
Not buying it. We talk about small releases and all these mechanisms and guardrails to be able to deploy to production, right? But when it comes to data, that's something that scares me quite a bit. And I think you need the expertise in that space to be able to make sure that because that's where the money is. Right? That's the organization's value is the data.
Yeah, I do agree, and we do definitely give different treatment where we know we're going to be fundamentally mutating data, even to the point. Sometimes if you do stuff in Postgres, it's going to lock the entire table, and it's like and we've learned what a lot of those scenarios are. But yeah, I really like the process that Dan was just talking about there. You can do some really seemingly destructive changes in a phased way. Even if you have to do stuff like dual write to places at the same time, there's strategies for doing it. And I love that kind of stuff, because basically you can change the world under the user, and they never notice a thing.
Yep. Do they?
No. Not if you've done it right, no. If you've done it wrong, then yeah, they will notice.
Maybe Fred read all the feedback from my LinkedIn post, and now he's like backtracking from last week.
I actually went and read it, and initially I thought, okay, it's only a few comments, and then I realized, oh my life, there's quite a few, and I read a few, and I started to think to myself, hold on. There's a few interesting things to consider, yeah?
We deal with sensitive data as well. We have some quite sensitive data about people. So and we treat it we treat those scenarios very mindfully and in small increments. So we would try and do that kind of phased migration wherever possible. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Well, we treat it seriously through the whole time. That's why I say. That's why I say when I look at a change, whether it's a migration or a change in something dependent on the migration or something in that, I'm always looking for risk in the change. Good code too, but I'm looking for risk in the change. And that's what I think. That's the main difference. That's the main difference I've spotted when you've got long releases happening versus people who are doing more trunk based. I think they get better at assessing risk in pull requests.
I made a kind of half snarky comment to one person on the LinkedIn.
I saw that. Yeah, I did.
You made a snarky comment. Come on.
Half snarky.
I thought, hold on, Dan, what are you doing? I actually sent a little heart emoji and said, "Hey."
Oh, did you? Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. No, I didn't. But I
go
back. Yeah.
Do you know when we were in the Beer Deluxe, or it might have been in the whiskey place, and I said you should delete your staging environment? I was joking, right? I'd done it.
Oops.
Didn't think you'd do it, but hey,
well,
fair play.
You know, you dared me, so you know what was I going to do? Can't back down from a dare. I think I thought of a few different things when I was thinking about what someone posted on the comments, and I was thinking they were talking about you know, kind of like that. Basically, if you don't have a staging or a test environment, you know, if you need one, if you want a perfect system kind of thing, right? Basically. And I was thinking about that and thinking that's not actually true, because I think through like 95% of my career, there's been test and staging environments, and there hasn't been like zero incidents across those systems. It just doesn't exist. So there's times when one of the biggest changes that I was involved in, or the biggest incidents, caused press, was big enough of an incident to cause press coverage, and impacted customers. I think we had about 15,000 customers impacted, something like that. Luckily, we caught it before everyone was impacted. But it was, that change was still tested, was still had a test environment, still had all the gates, all the things, reviews, all the stuff, right? It doesn't completely inoculate you to things going wrong.
Yeah, because it is all different, isn't it? It's like your staging environment is not loaded up in the same way that production is.
Yeah.
You don't have the same usage profile. You probably don't even have the same data, because in some cases you're not allowed to have the same data in your staging environment. There's so many differences that sometimes we've been caught out with that as well. Deploying something, it's like, it was never going to be the same. The only true test of that deployment is putting it into production and monitoring it closely and see what happens.
Yep. Actually, that was one thing you mentioned about how Datadog helped you. What did that look like exactly? Tell us about that.
Well, Datadog has this incredibly cool feature where you can automatically propagate where it spots errors of trending up in any part of your app. So even if you haven't like instrumented it properly, it'll alert it anyway, and it'll give the version and give you the comparison of where the errors, and it usually even gives you the exact piece of code, and it even hooks into your source control as well, so you can usually see and have a pretty good guess of exactly which piece of code has caused that particular error. So that feature alone has been amazing, because you can basically, some things slip through, but in most cases, even if you don't have specific instrumentation around it, we found you can deploy it and it'll spot the errors that you would have had a hard time to spot. So you've got a New Relic, haven't you?
No way.
No, you got Datadog.
That's a topic for another video. I got Datadog. Yeah.
Okay.
But we don't. If I go into the web interface, it does show me error outliers and anomalies and stuff like that, which is fine. But it doesn't alert us on it. I think you have to configure that part, maybe.
Yeah, we've got that set up. It gets spat into a Slack channel.
Yep.
We've definitely got more of a you build it, you run it mindset now. So the teams are actively looking at that alerts channel, and they jump on it straight away as soon as we've cleaned up a lot of the noise in the channel. So if something drops in there, it's like, oh yeah, we've actually got a problem. sometimes stuff slips through, and sometimes customers tell us we've got an issue, and it's never nice, but we jump on those pretty quick too. And it's usually really easy to spot because the amount of changes that we've made over the course of a couple of days, usually it's like, oh yeah, one of the teams will go, I know exactly what that bit I think it's related to this change, and we'll run it, So it's just made our ability to actually isolate the errors really rapid. So many benefits,
This is, I don't know if this is a slightly different topic, but related. I have an issue with tools like Datadog. You realize I have more issues with, so we won't go there. But let's just pick on Datadog. So it's very powerful.
Wait! Don't say anything that might cut off potential sponsorship. Okay.
I have to trade off the opportunity for feedback versus the sponsorship opportunity. So I don't know.
Sorry, Alan, you're not getting your socks.
I'm about to destroy those socks chances.
I have to be happy with my t-shirt then. So.
That's it. I think there's room for some of these tools to okay, if I go to the web interface, I can see anomaly errors, right? So it knows that errors have spiked on a particular build. Okay. And that wasn't particularly hard to set up. But why don't I get that alert out of the box? If it knows, it has the data, it knows the errors have spiked, why don't I get alerted to it out of the box? Why do I have to go and configure it?
Good question. I don't know. It's not hard to configure though, is it? You just got to do a bit of RTFM. So
I know. Actually, Datadog has so many bloody features, mate. It's like you could be there for months setting stuff up. We don't have a DevOps person, right? So it's on me, mate, basically, and the team. We're busy shipping features and value to customers, right? Like observability is like we do spend a bit of time on it, but there's limits to how much time we can spend. I think it would be better if I could just if you had the option even, recommend me something. Oh, hey, there's a bunch of errors for this that I'm showing you. Would you like an alert for this? Just click this. Yeah.
You should suggest that as a product feature.
Probably, yeah. I mean, we use Terraform to configure all of our Datadog alerts, monitoring, observability. So when a service is defined, there's a folder for Terraform which kind of sets up AWS, sets up Datadog, PagerDuty alerts, Slack integrations are kind of built in on the other side. But we can set metrics and stuff like that inside the Terraform. So you can say, for this service, here's what's important, here's where the thresholds should be, that kind of stuff. So I think that does kind of make sense, but I can't help but thinking there's a whole bunch of data that Datadog knows about the service and could very easily just go, hey, I noticed something's a bit weird. Like, for example, I get a call.
Bunch of sensible defaults for, I guess.
Sensible defaults. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
I get a call. So this happened a couple of times, actually, with different vendors. AWS is one in particular, right? We had a misbehaving configuration, which was, I can't remember exactly what it was doing now. It was some ECS configuration wasn't quite right, and it was just spinning up a whole bunch of stuff, costing us a lot of money, like per hour. And I got a call within an hour or so. I got a call from the account manager saying, "Hey, this is the manual human version. I'm sure AWS have alerts set up on their side, but the account manager called me and is like, dude, what's happened? Is this normal spend? Because something I think has gone weird with your stuff." So we were able to catch it. It cost us about, I think by the time we fixed it, it cost us about 5,000 USD, something like that, that cost us. So not exactly a cheap mistake, but we got the call. It would have been way worse if we hadn't got that call, because we didn't have alerting set up for whatever weird, wonderful thing was happening with that service. We had to get the phone call. So I don't know, maybe I think we need it.
Yeah, maybe you'll get it, because you're right. It's a specialist tool in itself, right? Using it's a massive product now.
Yeah, it's huge.
And you got to learn how to. We've had to teach the teams how to use it so they can get comfortable with it and set up their own alerting. Teams have got their own dashboards and stuff like this. So, but they've had to train themselves how to do it, or go on whatever university courses you can get out of Datadog themselves. So yeah, you're right. You're right. It's a high barrier to entry on it for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it needs a lot of time investment to set everything up. I think that's the issue I have with it. So
how does it work in the environmentless world, Fred? So you probably don't need Datadog. So
don't need Datadog.
We don't need Datadog. So I'm not going to get socks or a T-shirt, and that's fine. But yeah, I mean, it's like any good environment. You need monitoring and you need observability, and you need to take accountability for making sure those metrics are available. But I've got a different question. So we're talking about deploying to production, testing in production, and we're talking about some really funky stuff and launch darkly and all the goodies that goes with it. But do you have to do all of this when you start out? So if you want to transition to this new world, how do you start? What are the key things you have to consider, or what are the non-negotiables, those sensible defaults, Alan, you were talking about?
Yeah, where would I start? I think if you don't have some form of monitoring, then you're asking for trouble in doing this. If you're expecting to deploy more frequently and be in the dark about it, I feel like you're not setting yourself up for success there. It doesn't have to be Datadog or New Relic. I remember a company years ago where we moved into not quite trunk-based, but it was from quarterly deployments to weekly deployments. And they had a kind of home-spun monitoring system through, was it Nagios? Do you remember that old thing? I don't know if anybody uses it anymore. But we had a lot of custom scripts written in Nagios, pointing at the database, pointing at the boxes for when they went down, pointing at the errors that you get out, and it spat it all into this. So they kind of built their own New Relic. It would have been really hard to do more frequent deployments, I feel, without something like that, because you're effectively waiting for your customers to tell you that you've broken something. So I think, I think for me, I would always look to put something like that in place, even at a basic level. I would start there, and then the rest of it is really, getting the teams comfortable with making smaller changes more frequently and making it okay. Making it okay for it to be a bit of an experiment, because it's really difficult if you're used to doing long-lived feature branches. It's really difficult to start breaking down changes into smaller chunks, and you need to practice it. It's definitely a practice thing. So, I think you need to give the teams the permission to practice on it and to learn what techniques work, or what technique works with the database, what technique works with changing this part of a monolith. And I think that's where I'd start, because a lot of teams would just go, no, I'm not going to change. I'm just going to stick to the way I've done it. I think you need to give them the permission to say, it's okay. Not everything's going to work. We're there with you. And if it breaks, we'll fix it. And we'll figure out what to do next time to make sure it doesn't happen. So I think there's a bit of a cultural thing as well. That's probably the hardest thing to change, I think. The technology is easy. It's usually just a case of delete my staging environment and deploy it straight to production. It's less steps. You're deleting things out of your deployment pipeline. It's like delete. Yeah. There you go. Off you go.
Runs faster now.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've done it in the absence of significant amounts of unit tests as well. Because for me, it always comes down to assessing the risk of the change that you're making. That's how I've always looked at it. You've got to get good at that. That's how I've always felt.
Sorry, did you just say in the absence of unit test.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah, one of the systems that did that on, the very first one, where we went from quarterly to weekly, had no unit tests at all when we did that.
Okay. So the same person who called me over to his desk and said, "Where's your test?"
Yeah, that's how I started the conversation there about maybe we should write some tests. But yeah, when I joined, there was no tests.
No test.
There was way more when I left, but that took a bit of practice too. But yeah, that was the right thing to say anyway, Fred, wasn't it? So, wasn't that the right question to ask?
Yeah, it's definitely changed now. Yeah. But then, how did you assess that you could deploy without test? What are the key things you look at?
We got really, really good at studying the pull requests. I mean, really good at looking at pull requests. Really good at reviewing pull requests. Like, forensic about it, because we had nothing else. And where we could, we would refactor bits of code and apply tests around it. So we got confidence later on. But I think over the course of 2.5 years, we went from 0% unit testing to 5%. And very rarely did we go back and change the same bit of code, So we got value out of the ones that we'd written, but more often than not, we're changing a brand new bit of code. We got some value out of refactoring it and writing tests around it. But it's doable. For me, it always comes back to looking at the pull request, really properly reviewing it, like you understand it, and that you're going to be the one. If you're the reviewer, you're going to be the one fixing it in production if it breaks. That's the way I've always viewed it. So we replaced it with that.
We had a code base that we didn't write, but we took custodianship of and ownership of, and that had zero tests as well. But we did actually move it into our continuous delivery pipeline. But it was kind of similar actually to what you're saying. When the first deployment that we ever did for it, we actually did. So we didn't follow the previous pattern for deployment. We actually created a new pattern, which kind of followed the old one, similar, but it was like different, had to be different. So we set that up, and the first time it did require a whole bunch of kind of checks right down to the level of like reviewing every single line and going, just analyzing everything, every little bit. The other part that we did as well was that was the first bit, but then we added a happy path unit test. Actually, no, it wasn't a unit test. It was an integration level test, like an end-to-end test, black box, basically, because there were no tests in between. So we're like, okay, we put data in this end, we expect this outcome. And we wrote the happy path test for that. Then at least we knew that if we made changes that we didn't break the core execution of the code, we could still put some stuff in and get stuff out. And then when we started to make logic changes to the code, the way behavioral changes, we started adding unit tests to that from that point onwards. But so we haven't actually gone back and like gone through the entire code base and added all these testing. We've just basically done, I guess, happy path testing and started doing tests for every change that we make to the system. But I remember when that went live, I was nervous. Like I was seriously nervous about the change, and had things like rollbacks, thought through, tested, and was going, yes, we know exactly what steps we're going to do if this goes wrong. I even this was on an EC2 instance, so I took a snapshot of the instance, everything you can think of to just go, if something just goes catastrophically wrong, we have like multiple backup options, rollbacks, stuff like that. But it ended up going fine. But yeah, it did take a lot of kind of very particular review of every change. And there were some issues that were found from that particular level reviews.
Yeah. What about rollbacks? Yeah, I think you mentioned that on the last one, Fred, about rollbacks.
I mean, for me, it's returning to a healthy state.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So
that might be going forward.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And I guess that's, I mean, it all joins in what you mentioned about having the visibility to know that things are going wrong. Right. So you need to be aware of it, but then you also need to be in a position to recover as quickly as possible to a healthy state. And and this is where small changes really comes into play, because you're reducing the time it takes to return to a healthy state. And if you can even go as far as using feature flags to be able to switch between the two states, even better. But I think that it becomes a critical part when it comes to how long does it take for you to deploy back to production to return to a healthy state.
Yeah, I mean, that's wrapped up in one of the key DORA metrics, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree. If your deployment pipeline takes an hour, then...
Yeah. So,
yeah,
I
try to keep fast pipelines.
I have a question that I'm dying to ask.
Go on.
All right. And I wouldn't say it's controversial, but I'm really curious to know the answer. So we talk about Datadog, right? T-shirts and socks and all the goodies that goes with it. And then we spoke about New Relic, and then Dan was like, help me. But we've got AWS, and we've got CloudWatch, and metrics available. Why do we still opt for another product when we already have it available?
Over to you, Dan.
So our Terraform has both. So when a service is usually provisioned, we have Terraform that scopes Datadog alerts and metrics and stuff like that, observability. Then we have a CloudWatch section usually as well, because I don't know whether it might have been a hangover from not having Datadog at the beginning. And I don't think we also push everything into Datadog. So I think we only put AWS metrics in at some point. So things like load balancer stats, request results and error rates, we have a CloudWatch metric for that, which is a custom metric, which is basically like a percentage of requests that are errored or that are successful. We have an alert threshold based on that. So if it breaches that, it'll fire off an alert. That's a CloudWatch alert directly. Now, of course, we could use Datadog for it, but we already had it set up with CloudWatch. The biggest thing I find is that the log searching in CloudWatch is sorely lacking. I think that's where the massive shortcoming is for me. I will go into CloudWatch and I'll use it for things like database, like looking at database performance, like RDS. I'll look through metrics, CloudWatch on that. Sometimes I will look through, this is before we had Datadog, but I probably would still do this. I can pull in CloudWatch every service and its load balancer stats in CloudWatch and like time correlate things and error rates and stuff like that. That's quite useful. I use that. But the logging analysis I find is kind of really lacking, and that's where the massive drawback would be for me.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think if AWS wanted to build a fully integrated tool that wrapped it together in the same way as Datadog, they'd have access to way more insights than you could ever publish to Datadog, right? Yep. Datadog's only as good as the data that you're getting into it, feeding into it. But for some reason, they haven't done it. And maybe it's coming down the pipe. I don't know. But if you look at the things that they're starting to do in tools like Datadog, where when you do see an error, it'll actually do correlations between the services. you've got a reasonably complicated set of infrastructure, it'll give you its best guess as to where the root cause of the problem is. And I don't really see that. Maybe I've just not seen that feature in AWS, but I don't really see that kind of stuff, and I don't see that direction that it's heading in. I think at the level with AWS, it's always been like, here's the documentation, off you go, sort it out yourself. You know what I mean? A little bit like that. So
yeah,
it's always been
there's no reason why they couldn't do it. Like the correlation between like load balancer metrics and logs. Like we actually ship logs into a log group before it goes to Datadog. So the data is there in CloudWatch. You could correlate it. You could show what happened here and what the logs were doing. There should be no reason why it's not possible. Right?
Maybe it's coming. You know, I'd love to see. I mean, we played around a little bit with X-Ray doing the distributed tracing through. I think that was okay, but I didn't think it did it as well as Datadog did it. So yeah. But if they wanted to do it, I'm sure they'd smash it, right? But for some reason, maybe that's not where they see their value add in it.
Yeah, I think I don't know, but I suspect, you probably have to be good at something, and you might want to stick to your lane. Like if they're good at doing compute in a way, let's say, that is accessible, flexible for people, like, you would kind of go through different ways, which they've done over the years, like starting with EC2 and moving into containers and EKS, stuff like that. So there's different patterns and ways that you can use compute, and the way it's packaged up and how easy it is to use. Seems to be a lot of kind of progression on that side. But maybe that's their wheelhouse, probably.
I mean, nobody really and truly wants to do their own Postgres replication, right?
No, hell no.
No thanks.
Absolutely not.
Thanks.
I've done that before. I don't want to do that again.
I say this in Mable, even though they printed me a nice T-shirt with it on saying I'm a DBA. The first thing I say is I'm not a DBA. I don't want to solve these problems. Thanks very much.
No.
What do you reckon, Fred?
Over the weekend, I think that's a nice way to spend your weekend.
What's that?
DBA task.
Doing a bit of DBA?
Yeah, why not? It's like, I mean, if you really want to feel uncomfortable,
Oh, we had a thing a while ago, and we were speaking to some of the RDS guys, and they were talking through some stuff that I just had no clue about.
Yeah,
really, the into the depths of Postgres, and I was like, "Can you explain it to me like I'm 5, please? That would be really." It was so complex. Visibility maps, and it's like, wow, not stuff I'd ever heard. So, if Olga, if you end up watching this, I'm still not a DBA. Okay, so don't ever say that again. She embroidered me a T-shirt, bless her.
So you want to be a DBA, Fred?
I know. No.
In the environmentless world, what do you need a DBA for? So
I know. I mean, in my world, the same as we deploy wherever, data is wherever. We don't have structure. It's not normalized. We don't have indexes. We don't have cache. Why do we need cache? It's just there. It's always available. We don't need security. What
a nice world this sounds like.
Yeah,
it's good.
Look, I just have to say I'm not on medication at the moment. If it does come across as like, okay. So we're talking about CI, and we're talking about production deployments, and things can go wrong, and we need to be able to recover. But the thing that starting to resonate with me, and I'm becoming more aware of, is the business side of what we do, and that SLA agreement, right? And our customers, the expectation on availability. and we have commitments, and we setting these little 999 numbers out there and saying, we're going to, and when things go wrong, it contributes to the fact that we chewing on that budget that we have available. And then it's the financial implications and the commitments that we've made. How do we balance between almost the start of taking a risk and pushing the envelope, but also ensuring that we don't have a massive negative implication on the organization and the value that we bring to our customers?
You can go for that one, Dan.
Dum dum.
I'm kind of tempted to just go. If you think that your precious testing environment and process is going to save you, it's not going to save you. As a matter of fact, like the more harder it is to get to production, let's say, the more segregated it is, the more controlled it is, the harder it is to make changes to it if you're rolling back or saving something, right? If your production environment is not treated as special and you can make fast changes to the environment, then you can recover your system faster, right? And I think like the weird thing about the case of like people go, oh, we need, I don't quite get it, because I kind of see it as I am seriously committing. So I think I alluded to this on LinkedIn as well, but engineers, we do have a measure for it. I haven't checked it for a while, but at its peak, engineers were deploying like 3 times a day to production, each engineer on average. We were making, that was in a particular like peak time, we were just punching stuff out. And so that is so many small changes. If an engineer is doing that 3 times a day, the actual change that they're making is quite like very, very small, really, in the whole scheme of things. Like, what can you do in 2 hours? How much code can you write in 2 hours? Basically, right? That's what you're shipping to production. Even less if you look at, go and have lunch and toilet breaks and code reviews or whatever, PR requests, whatever, right? Your change is so small that I just look at it and go, that's actually where the risk is for me. Like if you've got a very complicated build steps, very complicated deployment scripting, very complicated environment with custom everything, points and click, there's still guys that love to point and click stuff in AWS or in some kind of ops fashion, right? Like all of these things scream to me risk for stuff going down. So I look at it as like if I've got full automation, if I've got small changes going in where like 2 lines of code are going in and the pipeline at most is 10 minutes in speed from end to end. So that's a full deployment, running a build, testing, having an artifact, doing things like immutable artifacts, doing things like all of these things, patterns that you can have running where the actual, like even rolling updates and rolling deployments into production, all this kind of stuff, your actual change and impact and stuff going wrong is so small that it just gives you, I look at it and go, this is so flexible and fast. I can actually do a full build and get to production under, 10 minutes is the pipeline speed. If it goes over 10 minutes, I'm kind of saying to the team, hey, this should be under 10 minutes. The vast majority of our pipelines are under 10 minutes. And so I would say, like, if you're able to maintain that, then you can actually change your production environment code, put in a bug fix, ship it to production within, say, 10, 12 minutes, 15 at most. I would look at that and go, well, that's where I want to be. Like, I don't want to be anywhere else where it takes like an hour to go in and change stuff and you carry risk of stuff going wrong and big changes, manual changes, all that stuff. I don't want to play in that world.
It's high stress as well, isn't it? Doing those style of changes.
Yeah,
it's high stress on the business. Might not feel as stressed, but the engineers definitely do.
Yeah. It's like a when what you were talking about before, Alan, about confidence, right? I actually have a lot of confidence in the systems, pipelines, and patterns and stuff that we've set up. When I'm talking to a customer or to a customer support person, I can say with confidence, like, this is what's going to happen, right? I can go in and make a change and say with confidence, even to like be able to, like, if you've got good test coverage, being able to write a test that actually exploits the bug and fixes it. You have like actual running tests that proves, I guess, that change is not going to regress into, reappear again, all this kind of stuff. So I can say with confidence to a customer, it's fixed. Now, in the past, I've certainly had situations where the bug does come back, right? Because you don't have the right level of test or process around it. And that's a terrible feeling. I'm actually quite in tune, usually for some reason, over my career even. I actually care a lot about customer impact of the work I'm doing. I never want to get a call from a customer to say, hey, this thing's not working. That's like the worst thing in the world for me. I take it personally almost. I'm like, the work that I do, the systems I build, I want to be kicking goals and, saving money for customers, saving time, whatever the value is that we're shipping. I want it to be there and happening all the time. I want customers to be happy. So anything that doesn't fit into that, I'm not kind of religious about anything. If I'm looking at a process or anything else, I will go, does this work? Is it better? Is it going to get me to production faster, more reliable, more secure, whatever? And there's always trade-offs with time and investment and stuff like that. But I'm looking at that scenario continually and going, does this actually work to deliver more value for customers? And if it's not, I was like, well, let's do better. Let's make it better.
Yeah. And that is leaning into all of those DORA metrics, isn't it? That indicate that businesses that do well in those metrics are usually high-performing organizations. So, and I always go in lack of anything else, I'll go for the data, right? So I'm going for the data, and there's more data in there than you'd ever want to support the idea that those things actually work and those techniques work, and everything in the DevOps handbook works. It's written by the same bunch of people. I would say as well, sometimes, Fred, you don't make any changes and stuff breaks anyway.
Because it's not a perfect world.
Nothing. Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Stuff changes, data structures change, tables get bigger. The index that worked yesterday doesn't work so well today, and
Infrastructure change.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. Datadog can go down.
Yeah. And even in then, you're still in a world of where you haven't changed anything and something randomly breaks. You want to put yourself in the best position to remediate it. And if your pipelines are slow and it takes hours to get work, the best. Usually the only outcome is you cut things out of your process to get it in. And sometimes that can make it worse. It's like, I'm just going to shoehorn this change in production and say, oh shit, it's worse now. It's we've all been there. It happens. So yeah, I don't know. I think I'm with Dan on this. What do you reckon, Fred? Would you?
Okay. Yeah. No. Well, it's 2-1, or I agree. Bit scared at the moment, but I do agree.
Yeah, and that's circling back to the start of this, right? It is scary. It genuinely is, and I think any fundamental change in any organization is always scary. I am very mindful of that. And people are scared of change, and they're scared that the change that they make is going to break something, And I think you have to have that culture around it as well to say, yeah, it might break, but it's okay,
That's why I think it's important that production is not a special place kind of thing. Like, it's not a protected thing where, because I think what that means is that culturally, I think it's a strong cultural thing, like what you're saying. If engineers are scared to make change, that's a big red flag, because you want them to be able to own production know how it works, like actually understand it, not kind of wall it off, have other people who are experts at it and you're just kind of shipping code and things like that, right? Like we've all worked in teams that had that structure back in the day before DevOps was a thing, right? Like ops versus dev. It's a classic kind of misalignment of incentives and stuff. You've got devs who want to ship things and ops who understand that shipping things causes outages and wakes them up in the middle of the night, so they don't want to ship things. And I think if that is probably like the example of production's a walled off place, so much so that you as a software developer don't even have access to it. You have to hand it off to someone else to deploy it. I think going in the opposite direction, moving, I don't know, maybe I'm too extreme about it, but I think moving as far as you can away from that can't be a bad thing. It's like you have engineers who actually know production, support production, understand how it works, deploy to it. It's not segregated. This is your playground. Mm-hmm. Like this is where you work. This is where your work goes to serve customers. You should kind of own it.
Yeah.
I like the mindset.
Yeah. I always feel like, there's a responsibility with that, right, on teams, but I'm also I'm making them feel accountable for it in a good way. It's like this is yours to do and change it how you want it to do, and if you want to deploy, you can deploy, right? And I think accountable empowerment is probably a better word. That's probably a stronger word, a better word to use. Accountable sort of goes with some level of responsibility. I think empowering a team to deploy whenever they want and change it the way that they want, I think that's really powerful. I think that's culturally really, really powerful.
What do you think about if you had a situation culturally where, let's say you have a whole bunch of teams who are working in a particular way, and say you've got this other team or this one team that's like, oh, we're going to build this new service, and you got some people who are quite in there, pretty amped up, and they're like, yeah, we want to do continuous delivery, we want to do it differently to the rest of the other systems, how they work. What do you think about having a team going off and either working differently to everyone else, or segregate, or having like a separate service, like a new service that does things in a different way? What do you think of that kind of pattern? Do you think it works?
For me,
I think you need to answer that one.
Personally, I love it when teams do something a little bit different and a little bit out there, and especially if they bring it back to the rest of the teams as a bunch of learnings. We write a lot of ADRs, the architecture decision records, and try and bring the findings back to everybody and share the learnings. Sometimes it doesn't work, Sometimes it tries something new, and we look at it and go, yeah, that wasn't so good. And we're pretty open and honest about it, but sometimes we just learn some different stuff. And I think the key thing is, I've been in some organizations where it was set up in a competitive way, intentionally. And that can work too. I noticed that several years ago when I worked in London, and it was one of the guys who was running one of the teams I was on, and he was like, I want to use all the new, cool, funky stuff, and I want to be able to deploy stuff in 10 minutes because I want all the other teams to be jealous of this team, because I want them to go and say, I want to work on that team. They're cool, So he sort of set it up, and that sort of worked as well. And he started a bit of a cultural and engineering shift in there, because people could see that we were really enjoying our jobs every day, and we enjoyed deploying regularly, and we had freedom to do what we wanted. But I think if it's not that, providing that you share the learnings back. But yeah, I just think giving the teams the room to experiment on stuff is, again, very important. I believe that's written in Accelerate somewhere too.
What do you reckon, Fred?
Look, I think experimentation is important, absolutely. But the challenge with that for me is when you start it growing tremendously and you're becoming a big organization and you have all these different implementations of flavors of autonomy that's been created in an organization. And then you have to maintain, you have to have the skill available. The individuals that drove that initiative decides to leave, and then somebody has to own it. That's when things for me really starts to become quite challenging. I think if you're a smaller organization, yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to have innovation. And I don't know if there's maybe different mechanisms to bring that in. So that experimentation to the point where it's you experiment, you're doing some sharing with the community, and then there's a form of adoption, and it becomes a standard. And I'm using standards not in the sense of, hail, doom, 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 we've decided. It's more just about a way forward that when we start looking at making changes, or we need to keep on adjusting based on new technology and new ways, or we have to scale and all the goodies that goes with that we're in a position to do that.
And teams' constraints are often dramatically different as well. I mean, the world that we worked in together, there was a high technology constraint there, wasn't there? And we tried to battle our way out of it, but it certainly wasn't greenfield, and we were all very mindful of that, right? So I think sometimes the ground constraints, it's a struggle to get out of them sometimes,
Yep.
But yeah,
yep.
I agree. Experimentation is good. Remember, did we not do the? Wasn't it the front end proxy that we did for the? We did, didn't we? Yeah,
we did. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that today, actually.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it worked too, didn't it? And I hope it got leveraged in other bits of code. And it was painful, wasn't it, to set it up in the first instance? But learned a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's actually, that was the start, and where we are now, it's definitely expanded, and we're definitely moving in the right direction in that same way of approaching and the same mindset.
Dan's even put his Xero t-shirt on. It's just
represent sponsorship. I hear Xero all over YouTube's, so get some sponsorship.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure Fred gets sponsored for his Tech Talks. Yeah,
surely. The CTO still hasn't accepted my LinkedIn request yet, so I can't advocate for you, Fred.
You haven't what?
The CTO of Xero hasn't accepted my friend request on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
still waiting.
He definitely won't after he's read that last thread.
Who's this cowboy? All right, so we should wrap it.
I think do we round it off with have we debunked any of the fear around CD, or is everybody still scared?
I think what Fred was saying, he was still scared, so I guess Fred's in the scared camp.
No, I'm definitely not scared, because, like I mentioned in our previous conversation, it's where we are now with technology, and the technology, the viability to be educated and to be exposed to different ways of doing things is ramped up tremendously over the years. So the unknown and what you had to be part of an area or an organization that is playing in that field has shifted a lot. It's more valuable to everybody. So it's not really that we're trying something tremendously new. It's well documented, it's well researched, it's well practiced. It's just you need to start implementing it.
Yeah, I think what we talked about with like where we started and some of the things we talked about, where it's not an immediate change where you just rip out everything and replace it and do it totally differently overnight. I don't think it ever looks like that. Even when you start something in greenfields, you're still always evolving it and, improving it and making it better. I think it's a good environment or a good approach probably if you're always improving, like experimenting, improving, looking at how you're doing things, trying to get better. The stuff you're doing good, cool, keep doing that. Try to do that better as well. Like I never look at like, say a very simple thing like the speed of your CI pipeline. I never look at it and go, oh, that's fast enough. Never. It's never fast enough. I'm like, if it's started, I kind of just every now and again I go in and check if I make a change to a system, because sometimes I'm not changing a system every day just for my role. So when I go in and make a change on something, I am taking note. Oh, the CI pipeline's running a bit slow if it is. And then it's like, oh, we should spend some time on improving this. I think if you're always improving and nothing's kind of sacred, then I don't know. I don't think it needs to be scary. I think small changes can be done over time. You can mature and make things better. So,
but if you had to upgrade Ruby, now that's scary.
Yeah,
it's all right. Just don't upgrade it.
You could not do that. I mean, we've seen that happen before, right?
Yes. I still have it's not live at the moment, but I do have a Rails app that's stuck on version 3, I think, and it's really hard work to upgrade it past that point. So I have a special Docker container that compiles Ruby from source, so I could use an old version.
Nice.
That's how committed I was to not upgrading it.
We obviously won't talk about any framework apps, will we? Will we, Dan? We don't want to mention that on this call about how difficult they are. Off limits. Off limits.
The topic for another video.
I would just say, I think in continuous improvement and experimentation, I think it's really hard to look at some of the stuff and kind of go, that's not going to work for me until you've tried it. That's basically what I said to all the teams. Say it's probably going to be better. Let's give it a whirl. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it is. But I think if you've got the room to try it and experiment and really critically look at it, then that's a good basis to work on, right? I feel that's what I always said to people. That's what I'd say to people on the thread and people who are unsure about what to do. Do some research and give something and go. Whatever you're comfortable with to make a little step forward, and it can be just little steps. You don't need to know exactly where you want to be, but if you can see the next step, just do that, right? So that's
good. So. I like it. That's awesome. Well, it's been awesome. Engineering of Awesome. Great chat. Thank you, Alan, for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. It's good. I'll go back and play my bass now. So.
Very good. All right. Thank you all. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me. Cheers.